Imagine standing alone on a windswept prairie, the wind slicing across your face, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction, and in that vast emptiness, every decision feels monumental, every action carries weight, and every moment is a confrontation with survival, morality, and the unknown. Now imagine seeing a photograph from that very moment, not in a textbook, not in a museum, not celebrated in history, but hidden, suppressed, as if the reality of struggle, resilience, and human complexity was too threatening to be remembered. These are the rare Wild West photographs that were banned from history books, and in their silence lies a story not just of a place and time, but of the human soul confronting its own shadow, courage, and destiny. The Wild West has long been etched into the popular imagination as a land of untamed adventure, sweeping landscapes, heroic cowboys, and dramatic confrontations where justice, freedom, and survival were constantly tested. History books and media have painted this era in broad, almost mythic strokes, often reducing the lives of those who lived during this time to archetypes: the lone cowboy, the outlaw, the pioneering settler, the noble lawman. But beneath these romanticized layers lies a reality far more complex, nuanced, and often unsettling. The rare photographs of the Wild West, particularly those banned from textbooks and historical narratives, confront us with a truth that is rarely acknowledged. The Wild West was not merely a stage for adventure and heroism, but also a place of profound struggle, moral ambiguity, exploitation, and resilience in the face of immense hardship. These images serve as portals into a deeper understanding of history, revealing the hidden layers of human experience, societal tension, and cultural dynamics that standard narratives often deliberately obscure or simplify. When examining these photographs, one immediately notices the absence of conventional heroism. A photograph of exhausted miners in the icy reaches of the Black Hills, for instance, presents a tableau of struggle rather than triumph. Their faces, lined with fatigue and perhaps resignation, speak to the enormous physical and psychological burdens of frontier life. They are not celebrating victory over a landscape, they are enduring it, negotiating existence in ways that require constant labor, ingenuity, and fortitude. The image forces the observer to confront the tension between idealized myth and lived reality, highlighting the ways in which society has long preferred sanitized stories over the raw complexity of life on the frontier. It is this tension between myth and reality that constitutes the hidden truth behind history. These banned photographs also reveal the darker undercurrents of human interaction, particularly those related to power, oppression, and marginalization. In contrast to the glorified tales of rugged individualism, these images document communities and individuals who were systematically overlooked, exploited, or marginalized. Among them were Chinese laborers in California mining camps, whose toil was essential to the economic development of the region, but whose stories were intentionally minimized or erased from mainstream historical accounts. There are images of Native Americans, displaced from their ancestral lands, enduring conditions of scarcity, confinement, and cultural suppression. The photographs convey with stark immediacy the consequences of colonial expansion and the uneven distribution of opportunity, privilege, and survival. Unlike textual accounts, these images do not require interpretation to sense injustice. They present it visually, leaving the viewer with a visceral recognition of suffering, resilience, and moral ambiguity. What makes these photographs particularly compelling is their psychological resonance. Beyond their documentary value, they function as mirrors to the collective unconscious of a society attempting to reconcile its ideals with its realities. The Western frontier has long occupied a mythic space in American consciousness, representing freedom, expansion, and the triumph of civilization over wilderness. Yet these images reveal the shadow side of that narrative: the human costs, the suffering, the ethical compromises, and the overlooked labor that made such expansion possible. In this sense, the photographs act as symbolic catalysts, challenging observers to confront the aspects of history and human experience that have been repressed or sanitized. They invite reflection on the dissonance between cultural mythologies and lived realities, illuminating the psychological mechanisms by which societies construct heroic narratives while suppressing inconvenient truths. The act of banning these photographs from textbooks and formal historical accounts itself carries profound significance. By deliberately excluding visual evidence of hardship, exploitation, and moral complexity, society engages in a form of selective memory, a refusal to integrate the full spectrum of experience into its collective understanding. This suppression mirrors the psychological phenomenon of the shadow, the part of consciousness that contains all those aspects of self and society deemed unacceptable, shameful, or threatening to the idealized image. Just as individuals often resist acknowledging their own darker impulses, institutions resist acknowledging historical realities that challenge comforting myths. The banned photographs, then, are not merely historical artifacts. They are provocations, demanding engagement with the aspects of collective memory that have been denied visibility and acknowledgement. Among the most striking of these images are those depicting ordinary domestic life under extreme conditions. Sod houses in the Nebraska plains, constructed from packed earth and grass, stand as silent testimonies to human ingenuity and perseverance. Photographs of families navigating harsh winters, tending to small plots of land, or hauling water in unforgiving landscapes reveal the quiet heroism of survival, a heroism that textbooks rarely celebrate. In these photographs, one witnesses resilience without drama, courage without spectacle, and human dignity amidst adversity. They force the observer to reevaluate what constitutes heroism and to recognize that the mythology of the Wild West, with its emphasis on gunfights and lawmen, obscures the day-to-day realities of survival, labor, and adaptation that define the lives of most frontier inhabitants. The emotional power of these photographs cannot be overstated. Unlike written records, which are mediated by narrative, interpretation, and selective emphasis, photographs capture moments with immediacy and unfiltered presence. A miner's furrowed brow, a mother's tense posture, or a child's uncertain gaze conveys layers of experience that transcend language. This immediacy allows the viewer to engage with history on a psychological and emotional level, forging a connection that textual descriptions alone cannot achieve. The banned nature of these images further amplifies their potency. Knowing that they were hidden from public view creates a sense of revelation, of encountering truths deliberately withheld. Each photograph becomes a silent interlocutor, urging reflection, empathy, and acknowledgement of the past in its full complexity. Beyond individual experience, these images also reveal the interplay of larger social and cultural forces. The Wild West was a crucible of change, shaped by rapid migration, economic opportunity, technological innovation, and social conflict. Photographs of ox teams hauling supplies across frozen plains, or of Chinese miners working in precarious conditions, illustrate the interdependence of labor, technology, and geography in shaping human life. They reveal how collective structures, economic systems, migration patterns, and environmental conditions intersected with individual agency to create a reality that was often harsh, inequitable, and morally ambiguous. By examining these images, one gains insight not only into personal experience but also into the broader historical dynamics that have shaped cultural memory and identity. In reflecting on the hidden truth behind history, one must also consider the transformative potential of these photographs for contemporary viewers. They challenge assumptions, provoke critical inquiry, and encourage a more integrated understanding of the past. They remind us that history is not a static record of heroic deeds and dramatic events, but a dynamic interplay of lived experiences, societal structures, and cultural narratives. They urge viewers to recognize the interplay between myth and reality, between the stories societies tell themselves and the truths they attempt to suppress. By engaging with these images, one participates in a process of historical reconciliation, integrating the suppressed and marginalized aspects of the past into a more nuanced, authentic understanding of the human experience. Ultimately, the rare banned photographs of the Wild West serve as portals into both history and the human psyche. They reveal a landscape not merely of physical challenge, but of moral complexity, resilience, and suppressed truth. They invite contemplation of the tension between myth and reality, between idealized narratives and lived experience. They expose the shadow aspects of society and the mechanisms by which selective memory shapes cultural identity. And, perhaps most importantly, they remind us that true understanding of history, of society, and of ourselves requires confrontation with uncomfortable truths, a willingness to look beyond heroic myth, and an openness to the full spectrum of human experience. To engage with these images is to engage with history in its raw, unvarnished form, to acknowledge the richness and complexity of human life, and to recognize the interplay between visible narrative and hidden reality. When we consider the history of the American frontier, the popular image that often emerges is one of rugged individualism, of cowboys, outlaws, and pioneers braving a wild, untamed land. Yet hidden beneath these heroic narratives are the lives of countless individuals whose experiences were far from the celebrated myths. These are the faces that history chose to forget, to suppress, to render invisible, for they did not fit neatly into the sanitized, glorified versions of the frontier that textbooks and popular culture preferred to preserve. Among them were Chinese miners, Native Americans, African Americans, women, immigrants of various nationalities, and families whose lives unfolded in quiet struggle and resilience, their contributions essential to the shaping of the West, yet systematically erased from collective memory. In the rare photographs banned from history books, these marginalized individuals are captured not as abstractions, but as living human beings, their existence speaking to the broader realities of oppression, survival, and resistance. In these photographs, one sees the unvarnished human consequences of migration, labor, and systemic exclusion. Chinese laborers who played a critical role in building infrastructure, mining gold, and supporting local economies often endured grueling work in hazardous conditions for meager compensation. Their presence in these photographs is frequently solitary or in small groups, emphasizing the isolation and precariousness of their existence in an environment that was often openly hostile to their presence. Their faces, captured with no effort to romanticize or dramatize, reveal exhaustion, resilience, and a stoic determination to endure despite overwhelming adversity. In their quiet expressions, one senses the tension between survival and dignity, the constant negotiation of identity within a society that actively sought to marginalize them. By erasing these images from historical accounts, society effectively silenced the testimony of lives lived on the margins, creating a distorted memory of the frontier that emphasized heroism while neglecting those whose labor and perseverance were foundational to its development. Similarly, Native Americans appear in these photographs not as mythical figures or distant symbols of a vanished past, but as living communities subjected to displacement, cultural suppression, and systemic violence. The banished photographs often depict individuals and families in moments of vulnerability, seated outside modest dwellings, enduring harsh winters, or participating in everyday activities under the weight of social and political pressures imposed by settlers and federal authorities. These images reveal the profound disruption caused by westward expansion, capturing the psychological and emotional toll of forced relocation, loss of ancestral lands, and the imposition of foreign systems of governance and culture. Each photograph becomes a testament to the endurance of human spirit, even in the face of deliberate erasure, revealing the complex interplay of oppression, adaptation, and resilience that shaped the lives of Native American communities during this period. Women on the frontier also occupy a space of both visibility and suppression in these rare images. While popular narratives often focus on male adventurers, cowboys, and lawmen, the photographs of women show the quiet heroism of survival in harsh, often hostile environments. Mothers tending to children, women laboring alongside men in farms or mining operations, or individuals managing households in isolated homesteads convey strength, ingenuity, and endurance. Yet, these images were frequently excluded from formal historical accounts, reflecting a societal bias that diminished the recognition of women's labor and agency. The psychological resonance of these photographs is profound. They reveal the ways in which gender roles were enforced, challenged, and negotiated under extreme conditions, and they underscore the resilience required to maintain a semblance of normalcy and dignity amidst uncertainty and hardship. By engaging with these images, one gains insight not only into the historical conditions of women's lives, but also into the broader patterns of invisibility and marginalization that permeate collective memory. The power of these photographs lies not merely in the subjects they depict, but in the emotions and human truths they convey. Unlike written records, which are mediated through interpretation, these images offer an unfiltered encounter with lived experience. A photograph of a young Chinese miner crouched over a pickaxe, eyes focused yet weary, conveys exhaustion, determination, and vulnerability in a single instant. Similarly, an image of a Native American child clutching a worn garment, seated outside a modest dwelling, evokes empathy and recognition of injustice without the need for textual explanation. These images transcend language, allowing viewers to confront the psychological reality of marginalized existence in ways that conventional history often fails to capture. Their emotional immediacy creates a bridge between past and present, allowing contemporary audiences to engage with the complexities of frontier life and the enduring legacies of marginalization. Banning these photographs from textbooks and public circulation is itself a reflection of broader mechanisms of cultural suppression. By excluding the visual testimony of marginalized individuals, authorities and historians effectively curated a version of history that emphasized heroism, adventure, and conquest, while minimizing the evidence of suffering, inequality, and systemic oppression. This act of selective preservation mirrors the psychological dynamics of repression, wherein uncomfortable truths are pushed out of consciousness to maintain a cohesive, idealized narrative. In doing so, society not only erased the contributions and experiences of marginalized groups, but also diminished the capacity of future generations to fully understand the complexity of the historical and social forces that shaped the West. The hidden faces of the frontier, captured in these photographs, challenge viewers to confront these repressed truths, inviting reflection on the mechanisms by which collective memory is constructed, manipulated, and maintained. Beyond the immediate context of labor, displacement, and gender, these photographs reveal the subtle textures of daily life that are often omitted from historical accounts. Families living in sod houses, communities gathering for meals or religious observances, children playing in the shadow of harsh landscapes. These moments capture the ordinariness and extraordinariness of life in conditions that demanded constant adaptation. They reveal how marginalized communities negotiated survival and agency within structures designed to limit their freedom, and they illuminate the ways in which culture, tradition, and social cohesion persisted even under duress. In this sense, the banned photographs function as cultural artifacts, preserving the unspoken stories of resilience, innovation, and identity formation that textbooks often overlook. The psychological impact of viewing these images is profound because they confront viewers with the realities of exclusion, injustice, and human perseverance. Observing the lived experiences of marginalized communities invites a reconsideration of familiar narratives, challenging assumptions about heroism, civilization, and progress. One becomes aware that the Wild West was not merely a stage for individual triumph, but a complex, contested space in which survival required negotiation, adaptation, and resilience. In witnessing the faces and environments of those systematically erased from historical narratives, viewers engage with the tension between visibility and erasure, presence and absence, myth and reality. These photographs thus become instruments of both historical and psychological insight, revealing the hidden contours of cultural memory and the human experience. It is also important to consider the ethical dimensions of these images. They ask viewers to confront their own assumptions about who is remembered and who is forgotten, about the value of life and labor, and about the ways in which history is curated to serve specific ideological or cultural purposes. They challenge contemporary audiences to question inherited narratives and to recognize the silences, gaps, and biases embedded in the historical record. By doing so, these photographs foster a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the frontier, encouraging engagement with both the achievements and the injustices of the period. In this way, the marginalized faces of the frontier are not merely historical subjects. They are catalysts for critical reflection, empathy, and a reconsideration of collective memory. Ultimately, the rare photographs of marginalized communities in the Wild West provide a corrective to simplified, sanitized histories. They reveal the breadth of human experience on the frontier, encompassing labor, resilience, suffering, and ingenuity. They remind viewers that history is not solely composed of the deeds of celebrated figures or the dramatic events of folklore, but also of the everyday struggles, adaptations, and contributions of those whose voices were suppressed. In engaging with these images, one participates in a process of historical recovery, restoring visibility to those who were long denied recognition and integrating their experiences into a more complete understanding of the past. By confronting the marginalized faces of the frontier, we confront the shadow of history itself, recognizing that the story of the Wild West is richer, more complex, and more human than the myths that have long dominated our imagination. The Wild West has long existed not merely as a historical reality, but as a symbolic and archetypal space within the collective imagination. Popular narratives often reduce it to tales of gunfights, gold rushes, and lawmen versus outlaws. Yet beneath these surface stories lies a profound psychological landscape, filled with archetypal forces that resonate across time and culture. These archetypes, the recurring patterns, symbols, and motifs that shape human consciousness, manifest vividly in the rare photographs of the frontier, particularly those images that were banned from history books. Through these images, the Wild West emerges not only as a physical place, but as a theater of the psyche, a stage upon which the deepest tensions of human existence, freedom and limitation, civilization and wilderness, heroism and moral ambiguity, are enacted. The first archetype evident in these photographs is the archetype of the journey or quest. Many images depict vast, open landscapes, solitary figures on horseback, or families navigating difficult terrain. These compositions capture the tension between human aspiration and environmental constraint. The frontier is simultaneously inviting and hostile, offering both opportunity and danger. To engage with these images is to witness the journey motif in its most elemental form, the individual or community confronting the unknown, facing trials, and negotiating survival. Unlike romanticized illustrations or cinematic depictions, these photographs reveal the real stakes of such quests. A settler trudging through snow, a miner laboring in freezing conditions, or an ox team hauling supplies across barren plains embodies the struggle inherent in the archetypal journey, the confrontation with external obstacles that mirror internal challenges. Here, the psychological dimension of the frontier emerges, emphasizing the interplay between outer hardship and inner development, the shaping of character, and the negotiation of identity in the face of extreme conditions. Another prominent archetype revealed in these photographs is that of the shadow. The shadow represents the parts of existence, of society, and of the individual that are often repressed, denied, or ignored. In the context of the Wild West, the shadow manifests in the suffering, moral ambiguity, and social inequities that standard narratives conveniently omit. Images of exploited laborers, marginalized communities, and impoverished families capture the aspects of the frontier that are rarely celebrated: the physical exhaustion, the injustice, and the quiet endurance that form the backbone of historical reality. By omitting these images from textbooks, society effectively sought to keep the shadow at bay, preserving the illusion of a heroic, orderly, and morally unambiguous past. Yet the photographs endure, demanding recognition, forcing the viewer to confront the discomfort and complexity inherent in any authentic account of human experience. They act as mirrors, reflecting not only the realities of the past, but also the unacknowledged dimensions of the collective consciousness that persist in the present. The archetype of the wilderness itself is powerfully expressed in these photographs. The Wild West is often depicted as a blank canvas for human ambition, but in the banned images, the land appears as a force unto itself, indifferent, formidable, and often overwhelming. Snow-covered plains, rugged mountains, and unrelenting deserts dominate the frame, dwarfing the human figures and emphasizing vulnerability and dependence. These landscapes are more than mere settings. They symbolize the untamed, uncontrollable aspects of existence, the forces of nature, fate, and circumstance that challenge human agency. In confronting such imagery, viewers are reminded of their own relationship to the unknown, the unpredictable, and the uncontrollable forces that shape life. The wilderness, as represented in these photographs, functions as an archetypal mirror, reflecting the existential reality that survival, meaning, and growth are inseparable from encounters with adversity and the unknown. The frontier also embodies the archetype of transformation. Across many of these banned images, one can perceive the shaping of individuals and communities under conditions of extreme challenge. Miners develop resilience through grueling labor. Settlers adapt through resourcefulness and ingenuity. Marginalized communities maintain cultural practices despite systemic suppression. These transformations are not dramatic or heroic in the conventional sense, but they represent profound psychological development. The photographs capture the quiet evolution of human consciousness in response to the pressures of environment, society, and circumstance. Transformation in this context is both external and internal. It is the adaptation of the human form to survive and the cultivation of inner strength, endurance, and moral discernment. Each image is thus a visual record of the archetypal process of individuation, the integration of disparate aspects of experience into a more complete, self-aware whole. The archetype of community versus isolation is another recurring motif in these photographs. Images of solitary figures traversing landscapes evoke the loneliness of individual struggle, while group compositions, families working together, miners laboring collectively, or Native American communities engaging in daily life, highlight the interdependence essential to survival. The tension between solitude and connection is central to the human experience, and the banned photographs vividly capture this duality. Survival in the frontier required both self-reliance and communal support, illustrating how archetypal themes manifest in tangible social structures. Observers are confronted with the complexity of human relationships in extreme contexts, witnessing the negotiation of roles, responsibilities, and mutual dependence in conditions that leave no room for complacency. A further archetypal dimension is that of morality and ethical tension. The Wild West, as revealed in these photographs, was not simply a landscape of black and white morality tales. Instead, it was a space where ethical ambiguity was omnipresent. Laborers were exploited to build settlements, settlers encroached on indigenous lands, economic opportunity coexisted with profound inequity. The banned photographs capture the moral complexity inherent in frontier life, revealing the interplay between ambition, necessity, exploitation, and resilience. Each image challenges the viewer to confront questions of justice, responsibility, and human accountability, reminding us that historical narratives often simplify these tensions to fit comforting stories of heroism and triumph. Through the lens of archetypal symbolism, these photographs compel a recognition of the ethical dimensions of human action and the ongoing negotiation of moral consciousness under pressure. The archetype of the threshold also emerges vividly in these images. The frontier represents a liminal space, a boundary between civilization and wilderness, known and unknown, safety and danger. Photographs of travelers crossing rivers, wagons navigating treacherous terrain, or settlers constructing homes on barren land depict this crossing of thresholds both literally and metaphorically. Thresholds are inherently symbolic of transition, challenge, and opportunity. They mark points where individuals and communities are tested, transformed, and forced to confront uncertainty. In the context of these banned photographs, the threshold is not a romanticized gateway, but a site of tension, struggle, and profound psychological significance. The viewer is invited to witness these liminal experiences and to recognize the universal human dynamics of challenge, transition, and growth that they represent. Another dimension of archetypal symbolism in these images is the confrontation with mortality and fragility. Life on the frontier was tenuous, and photographs often reveal the omnipresence of danger, disease, and environmental hazards. The faces of children, elders, and laborers carry expressions that reflect vulnerability, endurance, and the psychological weight of living under constant threat. These images serve as a reminder of the universality of mortality and the delicate balance between existence and extinction. In archetypal terms, they evoke the hero's encounter with death as a central element of the journey, emphasizing the role of awareness, courage, and adaptation in the human experience. The banned nature of these photographs underscores society's discomfort with mortality, fragility, and the unglamorous realities of life that disrupt heroic mythologies. Furthermore, these photographs reveal the archetype of resilience. Every frame, whether depicting the toil of miners, the endurance of settlers, or the persistence of marginalized communities, testifies to the human capacity to withstand adversity. Resilience is not portrayed as dramatic heroism, but as the quiet, sustained effort to maintain existence, agency, and dignity in the face of immense obstacles. The banned images provide a visual meditation on the psychological processes underlying resilience: patience, ingenuity, adaptation, and an unwavering commitment to survival. They emphasize the interplay between inner strength and external challenge, illustrating how the archetypal motif of endurance operates in tangible human experience. Finally, these images embody the archetype of memory and witness. By capturing moments that were systematically excluded from public history, the photographs themselves function as witnesses to reality, preserving truths that might otherwise have been lost. They challenge viewers to confront the incomplete, curated nature of historical narrative and to recognize the importance of bearing witness to marginalized experiences. In doing so, they operate at both a psychological and cultural level, reminding us that integration, reflection, and acknowledgement of the past are necessary for personal and collective understanding. The banned photographs thus serve as a bridge between history, archetypal symbolism, and human consciousness, offering insights that extend far beyond the immediate context of the Wild West. In conclusion, the rare banned photographs of the Wild West are more than historical records. They are rich repositories of archetypal symbolism. They reveal the journey, shadow, wilderness, transformation, community, morality, threshold, mortality, resilience, and witness embedded in frontier life. Each image functions as a mirror of the human psyche, reflecting the complex interplay of external challenges and internal development, of myth and reality, and of oppression and agency. By engaging with these photographs, viewers are invited into a profound contemplation of human experience, historical truth, and the archetypal forces that shape both individual and collective consciousness. The Wild West, as captured in these banned images, emerges not merely as a geographic or historical space, but as a symbolic landscape of the soul, revealing the hidden patterns, tensions, and potentials that underlie the human journey. The history of the Wild West, as it has been taught and preserved, is not merely a neutral record of events, but a carefully curated narrative shaped by the exercise of power. In the rare photographs that were banned from history books, one can see the tangible consequences of this selective memory. These images reveal the human experiences, struggles, and moral complexities that authorities, historians, and cultural institutions deemed inconvenient or unsettling. They document lives and moments that were deliberately hidden from the public eye, not because they lacked historical significance, but because they challenged dominant narratives of heroism, conquest, and national identity. The suppression of these photographs reflects the profound ways in which power operates to control knowledge, perception, and the collective understanding of history. To engage with these images is to confront the mechanisms by which societies construct their own memory, and in doing so, to confront the deeper psychological and ethical dimensions of authority and control. At the most immediate level, the banning of these photographs demonstrates the ability of institutions to dictate what is visible and what remains hidden. History books, textbooks, and formal archives are not passive repositories of knowledge. They are curated spaces in which selection, omission, and emphasis are deliberate acts. By excluding images of marginalized communities, struggling laborers, or morally ambiguous situations, authorities shaped the perception of the Wild West as a landscape of orderly progress, heroic endeavor, and moral clarity. This curation created a powerful illusion. The past appeared orderly, comprehensible, and aesthetically satisfying, while the more uncomfortable realities of oppression, exploitation, and suffering were rendered invisible. These omissions are acts of cultural power, controlling not only what people learn about history, but also how they emotionally and psychologically relate to it. The act of suppression is in essence an assertion of authority over collective memory, shaping identity by controlling the stories that are told and those that are forbidden. The psychological implications of this process are profound. By suppressing images that reveal hardship, injustice, or moral ambiguity, society engages in a form of collective repression. The excluded photographs represent the shadow of the historical narrative, the elements of experience that are uncomfortable, inconvenient, or threatening to dominant ideologies. Just as individuals repress aspects of the self to maintain a coherent self-image, societies repress aspects of history to maintain a coherent cultural identity. The banned photographs, in their quiet insistence on being seen, serve as a mirror to this repression. They confront viewers with the tension between the curated myths of the past and the lived realities of those who inhabited it, revealing the ethical and psychological cost of erasure. In witnessing these images, one is forced to reckon not only with history but also with the mechanisms by which power shapes understanding and silences dissenting voices. Power in shaping historical memory operates along multiple axes, including race, class, gender, and geography. Many of the banned photographs depict Chinese laborers, African Americans, Native Americans, and women whose contributions and struggles were systematically minimized or ignored. The exclusion of these images from mainstream narratives reflects the intersection of social hierarchies and institutional authority. By privileging the stories of certain groups, predominantly white male settlers, lawmen, and entrepreneurs, historians and educators reinforced social and political hierarchies, ensuring that marginalized voices remained peripheral. The consequences of this selective preservation are not merely historical. They extend into contemporary culture, influencing how identities, values, and social expectations are constructed and perpetuated. In this way, the manipulation of historical memory is both a reflection of past power dynamics and a mechanism for sustaining present ones. The banned photographs also highlight the ways in which the exercise of power is intertwined with ideology. History is rarely neutral. It is always framed through the lens of prevailing beliefs, priorities, and narratives of legitimacy. By excluding certain images, authorities implicitly communicated what was valued and what was deemed unworthy of attention. Scenes of labor, hardship, and marginalization threatened the dominant ideology of the frontier as a site of heroism, freedom, and moral clarity. They revealed the interdependence of wealth, opportunity, and oppression, exposing the systemic inequities that underpinned expansion and settlement. By controlling visibility, power not only dictated what was remembered, but also shaped the ideological framework through which memory was interpreted, ensuring that uncomfortable truths were recast or omitted entirely. The consequences of this suppression extend beyond historical knowledge into the domain of cultural and psychological formation. When generations of individuals are exposed only to curated, sanitized images of the past, they internalize a distorted sense of identity, morality, and possibility. The heroic myth of the frontier, reinforced by the absence of marginalized voices, cultivates assumptions about who matters, whose labor is visible, and whose suffering can be ignored. These assumptions influence collective values, ethical frameworks, and social priorities, often reinforcing patterns of marginalization and inequality. The banned photographs, therefore, are not merely historical artifacts. They are challenges to cultural consciousness, offering an opportunity to confront and integrate repressed knowledge into a more nuanced and ethical understanding of the past. The ethical dimensions of power in shaping memory are also evident in the material conditions captured in these photographs. Images of exhausted miners, isolated settlers, or marginalized communities living in extreme deprivation illustrate the human cost of expansion and economic development. By suppressing these images, authorities obscured the moral implications of systemic exploitation and environmental transformation. The photographs reveal the intricate web of social, economic, and environmental forces that shaped frontier life, demonstrating that progress and conquest were rarely neutral or uncomplicated. Engaging with these images encourages a deeper ethical reflection on the consequences of societal decisions and the responsibility of those in power to bear witness to human suffering rather than erase it. The suppression of these photographs also illuminates the tension between memory as a tool of identity and memory as a tool of control. Societies rely on collective memory to construct shared narratives, values, and symbols. At the same time, those who control the means of preserving and disseminating memory exert power over how that identity is formed. By selectively curating history, authorities shape not only what people knew about the past, but also how they felt about it and how they understood their own place in relation to it. The banned photographs, by revealing the lives of marginalized and oppressed individuals, challenge this controlled narrative, disrupting the comfortable myths of the frontier and forcing reconsideration of ethical, social, and psychological assumptions. They act as a counterbalance to institutionalized memory, insisting on recognition of complexity, nuance, and human reality. Beyond ethical and ideological dimensions, the banned photographs provide profound insight into the psychological and social effects of power on the human experience. Observing these images, one can discern the ways in which marginalized individuals navigated systems designed to constrain them. The stoicism of miners, the endurance of settlers, and the resilience of Native American and immigrant communities reveal the psychological strategies employed to survive and maintain dignity under conditions of oppression. These images document adaptive behavior, resourcefulness, and the negotiation of identity in response to power structures that sought to render certain lives invisible. In this way, the photographs operate as both historical testimony and psychological study, illuminating the interplay between external authority and internal resilience. The act of banning these images also serves as a reflection of collective fear of truth, discomfort, and moral ambiguity. By removing visual evidence of exploitation, suffering, and systemic inequity, those in positions of power attempted to create a past that was comforting, orderly, and morally legible. Yet the very act of suppression acknowledges the power of truth to challenge dominant narratives. The photographs themselves become silent witnesses, their absence in public discourse signaling both the awareness of uncomfortable realities and the lengths to which authority will go to maintain control over perception. Engaging with these images, even in their rediscovered form, compels viewers to confront the latent tension between the desire for narrative coherence and the necessity of acknowledging historical complexity. Furthermore, the banned photographs invite reflection on the dynamic relationship between history, memory, and justice. The suppression of marginalized experiences not only distorts historical understanding, but also perpetuates patterns of inequality in cultural recognition and moral valuation. By restoring these images to public consciousness, contemporary society has the opportunity to reconcile with past injustices, acknowledge the contributions and struggles of those who were erased, and cultivate a more inclusive understanding of the frontier. The photographs thus become instruments of ethical reflection, enabling a dialogue between the past and present that challenges both historical assumptions and contemporary social consciousness. In sum, the role of power in shaping memory, as revealed through the banned photographs of the Wild West, is multifaceted and profound. These images expose the mechanisms by which authority determined visibility, suppressed inconvenient truths, and curated cultural narratives. They illuminate the psychological, ethical, and social consequences of selective memory, demonstrating how historical knowledge is both a product and instrument of power. By engaging with these photographs, viewers are invited to confront the complexities of authority, marginalization, and repression, and to reflect on the ways in which memory shapes identity, morality, and consciousness. The banned images do more than document history. They challenge us to reckon with the dynamics of power that have shaped both our understanding of the past and the ethical contours of our present. Ultimately, these photographs compel a recognition that history is never neutral. It is a terrain on which power, ideology, and ethical choice intersect, shaping collective consciousness and identity. By confronting the suppressed realities captured in these images, society gains the opportunity to reclaim a fuller, more truthful understanding of the frontier, integrating the shadow of erased lives into a narrative that is both authentic and psychologically resonant. The role of power in shaping memory, as revealed in these photographs, thus serves as a vital lesson. Truth is never passive, and the recognition of marginalized experiences is essential to the ethical and psychological integrity of historical understanding. Photography is a medium that transcends the limitations of language, capturing not only the external appearance of a subject, but also the emotional, psychological, and symbolic dimensions of human experience. In the context of the Wild West, rare photographs, particularly those banned from history books, serve as conduits of profound emotional resonance. They preserve moments of hardship, endurance, triumph, and vulnerability in ways that written history, constrained by narrative conventions, often cannot. Unlike text, which interprets, summarizes, or filters experience, a photograph presents reality in its immediacy, allowing the viewer to engage directly with the subtle cues of expression, posture, environment, and interaction. In these banned images, one witnesses the unvarnished truths of frontier life, the exhaustion of miners, the quiet resilience of settlers, the dignity of marginalized communities, and the complex interplay of human aspiration and environmental constraint. Each photograph becomes a silent narrative, inviting psychological reflection and emotional engagement that transcends conventional historiography. The emotional power of these photographs is evident in their capacity to evoke empathy. Consider an image of a family living in a sod house on the Nebraska plains, surrounded by barren fields and harsh winter conditions. The composition, though static, communicates an entire lived experience. The constant labor required for survival, the strategies of adaptation, the emotional weight of isolation, and the bonds that sustain human life under adversity. The viewer, confronted with the intimate reality of these individuals, cannot remain emotionally neutral. The photograph acts as a psychological bridge, transporting the observer into the lived experience of the subjects, fostering empathy and recognition of shared humanity across time and circumstance. By contrast, textual descriptions of the same scene, often sanitized or abstracted, fail to convey the immediacy of emotion or the tangible sense of presence that a photograph achieves. The banned photographs, in preserving these moments, assert the primacy of emotional truth in understanding history. The photograph's capacity to communicate complex psychological states is another dimension of their significance. In the faces of miners, settlers, and marginalized individuals, one can discern layers of fatigue, determination, fear, hope, and quiet resilience. These expressions are not stylized or dramatized. They are authentic, spontaneous, and profoundly revealing. A miner wiping sweat from his brow after hours of grueling labor, a mother tending to children amid scarcity, a Chinese laborer crouched over a pickaxe, all convey psychological realities that are difficult to articulate in words. The viewer is invited to contemplate the internal lives of these individuals, to consider the emotional and cognitive strategies they employed to navigate adversity, and to reflect on the universal human responses to struggle and survival. In this sense, the banned photographs function as visual psychology, providing access to the inner worlds of those who inhabited the frontier. These photographs also capture the tension between vulnerability and resilience, a central theme in the human experience. The Wild West, as represented in these images, was a place of constant challenge, where environmental extremes, social inequities, and economic pressures demanded extraordinary endurance. Yet within this context of vulnerability, one also observes the quiet strength of human adaptation. Settlers constructing homes from sod or timber, miners laboring under harsh conditions, and marginalized communities maintaining cultural practices amidst displacement, all demonstrate forms of resilience that are simultaneously practical, emotional, and moral. The emotional resonance of these photographs lies in their ability to convey this duality, the recognition of suffering alongside the acknowledgement of human agency, the coexistence of fragility and and fortitude. This tension is psychologically compelling because it mirrors the universal human experience of navigating adversity while striving for dignity, autonomy, and survival. The banned nature of these photographs amplifies their emotional and psychological significance. By deliberately excluding these images from textbooks and formal histories, authorities sought to control the narrative of the Wild West, emphasizing heroism, adventure, and moral clarity while suppressing evidence of suffering, inequality, and moral complexity. This act of suppression, however, imbues the photographs with an additional layer of meaning. They become artifacts of resistance, bearing witness to the realities that power sought to conceal. Knowing that these images were hidden for decades evokes a sense of revelation, of encountering truths that were deliberately denied, and heightens the emotional impact of the photographs. The viewer experiences not only the content of the image, but also the historical and cultural context of its suppression, deepening the psychological engagement with the material. The power of these photographs extends beyond individual empathy to collective emotional resonance. They provide a shared visual language through which contemporary audiences can connect with the experiences of those who lived in the past. The expressions of exhaustion, hope, determination, or despair captured in these images evoke recognition across time, reminding viewers that human emotions and struggles are consistent and universal. A child's uncertain gaze, a laborer's stoic posture, a family's quiet resilience, these elements resonate with viewers because they reflect fundamental aspects of the human condition. The banned photographs, by presenting these emotional truths unmediated, create a space for communal reflection and understanding, enabling society to acknowledge histories that were systematically excluded from public memory. The photographs also function as ethical instruments, compelling viewers to confront the emotional and moral dimensions of historical experience. Images of marginalized individuals, Chinese miners, Native Americans, women, and impoverished families reveal the consequences of social inequities, exploitation, and systemic oppression. The emotional resonance of these images prompts ethical reflection, recognition of suffering, acknowledgement of resilience, and consideration of responsibility. By engaging with these photographs, viewers are invited to move beyond abstract historical knowledge and into a more intimate, morally engaged understanding of the past. The act of witnessing, facilitated by the emotional immediacy of photography, fosters both empathy and critical reflection, encouraging an integration of ethical awareness with historical consciousness. The psychological power of these images is also evident in their capacity to evoke memory and imagination. While photographs document specific moments, they also invite viewers to imagine the broader context, the events leading up to the captured moment, and the consequences that followed. A photograph of an exhausted miner evokes not only the physical labor, but also the social, economic, and emotional conditions surrounding his life. The long hours, the scarcity of resources, the isolation, the fear of failure, and the hope for reward. Similarly, an image of a Native American family on a displaced reservation prompts reflection on the cultural, political, and psychological ramifications of forced relocation. In this way, the photographs serve as catalysts for imagination, memory, and historical empathy, engaging the viewer in a multi-dimensional psychological experience that extends far beyond the literal content of the frame. Another significant aspect of the emotional resonance of these photographs is their ability to convey continuity and change. The Wild West, often represented as a space of transformation and flux, was simultaneously a landscape of enduring human struggles and universal emotional experiences. Banned images capture both the transient conditions of life, harsh winters, laborious work, temporary settlements, and the enduring human qualities of perseverance, hope, and adaptation. This duality reinforces the photograph's psychological depth. They communicate the impermanence of circumstance alongside the constancy of emotional experience, reminding viewers that while environments and circumstances may change, the human response to adversity, resilience, fear, hope, and connection remains a fundamental aspect of existence. The banned photographs also offer insight into the subtle dynamics of social interaction, community, and belonging. Images depicting families working together, miners collaborating in labor, or marginalized communities maintaining social rituals illustrate the ways in which human connection provides emotional sustenance, psychological stability, and practical support. The expressions, gestures, and postures captured in these images convey relational dynamics that textual descriptions often flatten or omit. Observing these interactions, viewers gain an intuitive understanding of the importance of social bonds in navigating hardship and adversity, deepening both the emotional and psychological appreciation of historical experience. Ultimately, the emotional resonance and power of these photographs lie in their capacity to reveal the invisible dimensions of history, the unspoken experiences, the suppressed suffering, the quiet resilience, and the enduring humanity of those whose lives were often hidden from view. By engaging with these images, viewers are invited to inhabit the emotional and psychological reality of the frontier, to confront the consequences of suppression and selective memory, and to cultivate empathy, reflection, and historical consciousness. The banned photographs, in preserving these emotional truths, offer a form of witness, remembrance, and psychological engagement that transcends conventional history. They remind us that understanding the past requires more than facts and dates. It demands attention to the inner lives, emotions, and experiences of the people who lived it, and a willingness to confront both the beauty and the suffering that defined their existence. History, as it has been conventionally told, is never a neutral recounting of events. It is a narrative shaped by choices, decisions about what to preserve, what to highlight, and equally importantly, what to suppress. The Wild West, long mythologized in popular culture as a space of adventure, heroism, and lawless freedom, has been selectively remembered, with countless stories of hardship, endurance, and marginalized experience hidden from view. The rare photographs banned from textbooks and official historical records present an opportunity to reclaim these lost narratives. By engaging with these images, society can restore suppressed voices, recover complex truths, and challenge the sanitized myths that have dominated collective memory for generations. Reclaiming the lost narrative is not merely an academic exercise, it is a profound psychological and ethical endeavor, one that engages with the shadow of history and invites reflection on the human capacity for resilience, creativity, and moral reckoning. The act of reclaiming the lost narrative begins with recognition. The banned photographs document lives and moments that were intentionally excluded from mainstream accounts. Chinese laborers enduring extreme working conditions, Native American families navigating forced displacement, settlers struggling to survive in harsh and isolated landscapes, women maintaining households and supporting communities under severe constraints. Recognition involves more than acknowledging the existence of these individuals. It requires an appreciation of their lived experience, the challenges they faced, and the contributions they made to the development of the frontier. Each photograph serves as a visual testament to existence, asserting the presence, dignity, and humanity of those who were deliberately rendered invisible. The process of reclaiming begins when viewers confront these images not as curiosities or historical oddities, but as active evidence of a fuller, more complex human story. One of the most profound aspects of reclaiming suppressed narratives is the psychological integration of marginalized perspectives into the collective understanding of history. By confronting images that reveal suffering, resilience, and moral complexity, viewers are compelled to reconcile the disparity between the heroic myths of the frontier and the lived realities of its inhabitants. The Chinese miner, whose exhausted posture conveys both physical strain and quiet determination, challenges the myth of the lone self-made adventurer. The Native American family, navigating the consequences of forced relocation, exposes the human cost of expansion and conquest. Women laboring on isolated homesteads disrupt the narrative of male-centric heroism. Integrating these perspectives fosters a more nuanced understanding of history, highlighting the interplay between individual agency and systemic forces, and emphasizing that historical experience is not monolithic but composed of intersecting lives, struggles, and moral choices. Reclaiming the lost narrative also involves acknowledging the ethical dimensions of historical memory. The suppression of certain images and experiences reflects not only a desire to control perception, but also an avoidance of uncomfortable truths, the inequities, injustices, and moral ambiguities inherent in frontier life. By restoring these images to public consciousness, society engages in an ethical act of recognition, confronting the consequences of omission and erasure. This ethical engagement is both personal and collective. On an individual level, viewers are invited to reflect on their assumptions, biases, and understanding of justice and human dignity. Collectively, reclaiming the narrative fosters a broader societal reckoning, enabling communities to acknowledge the full spectrum of historical experience, including the contributions, suffering, and resilience of marginalized groups. The photographs thus serve as instruments of ethical reflection, providing tangible evidence that challenges complacency and encourages moral attentiveness. The banned photographs also illuminate the process of cultural memory formation and the dynamics of forgetting. History is not a static record. It is actively constructed through selection, preservation, and interpretation. What is included in textbooks, museums, and public discourse reflects prevailing cultural values, political priorities, and power dynamics. The exclusion of images documenting marginalized experiences demonstrates how forgetting can be an act of control, shaping collective identity while erasing dissenting voices. Reclaiming the lost narrative challenges this selective memory, restoring visibility to those who were omitted, and providing a more accurate representation of social, cultural, and historical realities. The process underscores the importance of critical engagement with historical sources, revealing that true understanding requires attention not only to what is remembered, but also to what has been intentionally or inadvertently forgotten. The emotional and psychological impact of reclaiming these narratives is profound. The banned photographs allow contemporary viewers to connect with historical experiences on a visceral level, fostering empathy, reflection, and moral imagination. Observing the exhaustion of laborers, the resilience of settlers, the quiet determination of marginalized communities, viewers gain insight into the lived reality of human struggle and adaptation. This engagement is not merely cognitive, it is affective, eliciting recognition, sorrow, admiration, and reflection. Through this emotional connection, the lost narrative is restored not only as a factual account, but also as a living, psychologically resonant experience, bridging the temporal and cultural distance between the present and the frontier past. Reclaiming suppressed narratives also emphasizes the multiplicity of perspectives inherent in any historical moment. The Wild West, often portrayed in popular culture as a singular narrative of expansion and adventure, is revealed through these photographs as a complex, contested space. Different groups experienced the same landscapes in radically different ways. Settlers faced environmental hardships and isolation. Laborers confronted exploitation and danger. Indigenous communities endured displacement and cultural suppression. Women negotiated gendered expectations in extreme conditions. Each photograph captures a unique perspective, contributing to a mosaic of experience that challenges oversimplified historical narratives. By engaging with these diverse viewpoints, viewers can reconstruct a more holistic understanding of the past, recognizing the interconnectedness of lives, struggles, and societal structures. The act of reclaiming the lost narrative also involves questioning and deconstructing myths. The Wild West, as traditionally presented, is saturated with heroic, romanticized imagery. Lawmen maintaining order, outlaws evading capture, cowboys taming the wilderness. While these stories hold symbolic and cultural significance, they often obscure the lived realities of labor, oppression, and survival. The banned photographs disrupt these myths, presenting evidence of daily endurance, moral ambiguity, and human vulnerability. Engaging with these images encourages a critical re-examination of familiar narratives, prompting viewers to distinguish between legend and reality and to integrate the shadow of suppressed experience into historical consciousness. In doing so, the lost narrative is not only reclaimed but also transformed, becoming richer, more accurate, and more psychologically resonant. The process of reclamation also highlights the transformative potential of visual documentation. Unlike textual records, photographs convey both external reality and internal experience simultaneously. The posture, expression, and environment captured in a single frame communicate the intertwined dimensions of physical, emotional, and social reality. A miner's slumped shoulders, a mother's careful attention to children, a family's construction of a sod house, all provide layered insights into human resilience, vulnerability, and adaptation. By preserving and engaging with these images, society gains access to the nuanced textures of frontier life, integrating them into collective memory and enriching understanding in ways that purely textual accounts cannot achieve. Moreover, reclaiming the lost narrative is an act of psychological integration for society itself. By confronting the suppressed, marginalized, and morally complex dimensions of history, contemporary viewers engage in a process akin to the individuation of collective consciousness. The reintroduction of suppressed experiences, voices, and realities allows society to integrate its historical shadow, fostering a more mature, ethical, and empathetic engagement with the past. The banned photographs, in this context, function as catalysts for reflection, self-examination, and moral growth, challenging viewers to acknowledge the full spectrum of human experience and to recognize the enduring relevance of historical lessons. Finally, reclaiming the lost narrative underscores the enduring human need for recognition and remembrance. The individuals captured in these banned photographs, laborers, settlers, marginalized communities, women, and children, were denied visibility and acknowledgement in their time. By restoring their images and stories to public consciousness, society fulfills a vital ethical and psychological function. It bears witness to lives that were previously erased, affirms the value of human experience in all its diversity, and ensures that memory encompasses both triumph and struggle, resilience and vulnerability, heroism and quiet endurance. In doing so, the lost narrative is not only recovered, it is honored, integrated, and made meaningful for present and future generations. In sum, reclaiming the lost narrative through engagement with banned Wild West photographs is a multidimensional process encompassing historical, psychological, ethical, and emotional dimensions. These images provide access to suppressed truths, marginalized voices, and complex human experiences that challenge sanitized myths and curated histories. They invite empathy, critical reflection, and ethical engagement, fostering a deeper understanding of the frontier and its inhabitants. By restoring visibility to the erased, marginalized, and morally complex dimensions of history, society not only recovers knowledge but also integrates the shadow of the past, cultivating a more holistic, nuanced, and psychologically resonant comprehension of human experience. Reclaiming the lost narrative is thus an act of justice, insight, and ethical responsibility, transforming the way we perceive, remember, and relate to the history of the Wild West and to the enduring legacies of human struggle, resilience, and creativity.